Welcome to another exciting and informative episode of the Entrepreneurs Podcast, a place to hear real entrepreneurs and business owners bear it all. I'm your host, Randolph Love III, and we do have another entrepreneur on the podcast today. But before we bring them on, I want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by Shield Wolf Strongholds, a wealth growth and protection company when it comes to employee benefits, estate planning, retirement planning, life insurance. If your plan ain't Shield Wolf, your plan ain't strong. If you want to retire higher than you would have prior, make sure you would visit www.shieldwolfstrong.com. Now to our guest, Sonny, the founder and owner of Precision Accounting and Consulting. Sonny is a seasoned expert in financial management and strategic business consulting, specializing in providing outsourced CFO services to help companies grow and thrive. With his extensive experience in helping businesses streamline their finances, improve profitability, and making informed decisions. Sonny, welcome to the Entrepreneurs Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Absolutely. How long have you been doing what you're doing now?
I've owned my business now for, I would say, going on a little over 5 years now. I've been in the accounting space for over, it's going close to 13, 14 years now. I started my journey as a blue-collar worker. I went to school very late. I went to school in my teens. My teens. I didn't go to school in my teens. I went back to school at the age of 26. Before that, I was always a blue-collar worker, working in construction, food industry. I had my own business as an auto detailer and body shop that I had for many years. I talked about this before on other podcasts. I feel like I'm just speaking for me, but more specifically the adult male. You don't really know what you want until I felt I was the age of 25, and they've done studies on it, and I feel like your brain does not mature until you're the age of 25, where you actually have a clear mindset of what you want to do. There's some people that are just born with it where they know, from the age of, 12 or whatever, that they know they want to do this. But majority of people out there really don't know, and I had to go through life experience and hurdles, to learn and make mistakes and all that fun stuff to kind of bring me to where I am today, and it was all worth it. Now I own a successful business. I have a beautiful wife and two beautiful kids. I own a home, and I have my health, and there's nothing more I can ask for, but I have to say, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I didn't think this was all possible, but I took an investment and a chance on myself, and it paid dividends, and now I help advise anywhere from people doing 5 million to, 30, 40 million. I have some guys that have $100 million worth in assets where I help advise them on, how to utilize their cash correctly and how to utilize their profits and grow their business efficiently.
Everybody loves omelets, right? But in order to make that omelet, you did have to break a few eggs. It sounds like 15 years later, you have a beautiful omelet based off those eggs that you are willing to buy and crack along the journey.
100%. Yeah, 100%, and I have a few people to owe that to, one being my mother, right? My mother came from a third world country, Guyana. So Guyana is in South America, right? Next to a little country next to Brazil. She came, a lot of people don't know where Guyana is, so that's why I explain it. It's not like Brazil, where everybody you hear Brazil and Guyana is not a country that's really well known. It's, its only fame to glory is Jim Jones. I don't know if you remember Jim Jones from back in the 80s. They had that cult, and they created this whole mass suicide down in Guyana, and that was the only thing people knew Guyana from. So It's a West Indian, type of background, Caribbean type of area, but it was a third world country, very poor. And my mother had left that country at the age of 16 years old, came to America with nothing, had my sister a year later at a very young age at 17, and then had me a few years later. And she basically lived the American dream. She was able to get a job. At first she was at a warehouse, and, she went through her trials and tribulations, and then she was able to land a job at the supermarket where she worked her way up through the corporate ladder there. And she was able to be their bookkeeper there for about, she worked there for 40 years, and back then in the 90s, right, you were able to work at like a supermarket, a Home Depot, Kmart, or any of these places and earn a sustainable living wage. And that went a long way. You were able to buy a house. You were able to, provide for your family. It went a long way. I remember, when my mom finally earned enough money in her wages where she got raises, and was able to earn a sustainable living wage. I really didn't want for much. I grew up poor in the beginning. I shared a bed with my mom and my sister till like I was the age of 11. I grew up in Queens, New York, in a one-room apartment. But then when my mom finally met that plateau and worked hard and sacrificed everything, she met my stepfather, and they worked at the same company. My stepfather, who I pretty much allude to as my father. He was a manager at the store, and they got married, and they were able to move us out and buy a house out in Long Island, New York. And Long Island, New York is one of the most, probably next to California, probably one of the most expensive areas to live in the United States, taxes wise. And she was able to do that just from working for a supermarket. And when we came out to Long Island, I was like in heaven. I had my own room, and this was this was foreign to me, and then after that, from the age of like 11, 12, I didn't want or need for a thing. My mother was able to provide for that. And on top of that, she was able to instill in me a work ethic that I still carry with me today. They had me working from the age of 12 years old. I was bagging groceries at their supermarket. You used to bag the groceries for people, and you put a little tip jar out there, and I would come home with like $75 in a day. Back then in the 90s, that was a lot of money, and and it just developed. When I got that taste of earning my own money, I wanted more, and from the day I could actually work a real job, I was able to do that. And I always had a side hustle. I was building computers. When I started getting into computers, I had an knack for cars, so I turned that into a whole business. I had little ventures spread out all over the place. And, my mother's dream was for me to go back to school. And, education was very big in our household. And as a kid, I rebelled. I hated education. I hated high school. I didn't want anything to do with it. I wanted to party and have fun and, make all these mistakes. And finally, after, too much time of doing that, I called it quits. And I saw my peers passing me by, and, I had to take a hard look at myself and see what I wanted to do with my life. And the detailing business that I had, the auto detailing business I had, and the auto body was doing really well. I was able to buy my own truck. I had, multiple clients. I had my own shop. But I had some wear and tear in my body just from doing it for a number of years. And I remember going to the doctor and him telling me I had pulled something in my knee. And I remember him telling me, listen, if you're going to go down this route of this type of work, by the age of 40, 45, you're going to have a lot of problems, because work, it's demanding, just the way you have to, do certain things.